I thought my wife was cheating, but what I found will haunt me forever. My wife Lisa and I had been married for over 15 years. We lived in a quiet tree-lined neighborhood where the homes were modest, but everyone took pride in maintaining their lawns and keeping up appearances. Our two kids, Sarah, 13, and Tommy, 11, were the center of our lives, and on the surface, everything seemed perfect. I was a systems analyst for a mid-sized tech company, while Lisa worked as a consultant for a boutique marketing firm. Life was steady, even predictable. That's why I was blindsided when Lisa suggested we take a trip to an exclusive resort, an invitation from her client, Robert Chase. Robert was a multi-millionaire, a self-made man who built his wealth in the real estate business. Lisa had been working with him for nearly a year, and though she occasionally mentioned him, it wasn't until this weekend invitation that I realized how close they had become. It didn't bother me at first. Business was business, and in her line of work, developing relationships with clients was part of the deal. Still, something about Robert made me uneasy, though I couldn't put my finger on why. The invitation seemed innocent enough. A private island, a luxurious getaway with a few other couples, all expenses paid. Robert's company had just closed a massive deal, and he wanted to celebrate with his inner circle. When Lisa first told me about it, she seemed overly enthusiastic, almost like she had been waiting for this moment. She assured me it would be a weekend of relaxation, and Robert had insisted I come along. As the days led up to the trip, something gnawed at me. I couldn't explain it. Maybe it was the way Lisa started paying more attention to her appearance. New outfits, hours spent in front of the mirror. Maybe it was the way her eyes lit up whenever she mentioned Robert's name. I tried to shake off the feeling, convincing myself it was just a work thing. But deep down, I couldn't ignore the growing sense of dread. We flew to the island on a Friday morning in a private jet Robert had chartered for us and the other guests. The island was like something out of a movie: pristine beaches, turquoise waters, and a villa that could rival any five-star resort. Robert greeted us with open arms, exuding charm and confidence. He was in his mid-40s, handsome, with the kind of charisma that made people gravitate toward him. His wife, Angela, was beautiful, elegant, and seemed perfectly content in their world of wealth and luxury. The first day was filled with the typical activities: swimming, sunbathing, and sipping cocktails on the beach. Robert played the gracious host, making sure everyone was comfortable, and I couldn't deny that he was good at it. Lisa, however, was more distant than usual. She spent most of the day chatting with Robert and Angela, leaving me to make small talk with the other guests. Something felt off. I tried to push the thoughts away, to relax and enjoy the trip, but I couldn't shake the sense that something was wrong. That night, after a lavish dinner on the terrace, Robert pulled me aside. He had a proposition, he said, and it wasn't exactly business related. My gut churned as he explained his offer. He was interested in my wife, more than just professionally. He didn't beat around the bush. He wanted to spend the weekend with her, and in return, he was willing to make it worth our while. A mutually beneficial arrangement, he called it. I stood there, stunned, unable to speak, my fists clenched as I fought the urge to punch him right then and there. What made it worse was that when I confronted Lisa, she didn't seem shocked. In fact, she admitted she had considered it. Her reasoning was cold and calculated. This was an opportunity to secure our financial future, she said. A weekend with Robert could mean a significant payout, enough to change our lives forever. I felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. The woman I had spent my life with, the mother of my children, was standing in front of me, calmly suggesting we sell out our marriage for money. I didn't know what to say, didn't know how to respond. The betrayal was too deep, too raw. Over the next few days, the tension between us grew unbearable. Lisa was distant, spending more time with Robert while I stewed in anger and confusion. The other guests seemed oblivious to the undercurrent of deceit, but I could tell they were watching us, waiting to see what would happen. I had never felt so alone. On the second night, after another elaborate dinner, Robert approached me again. This time, he upped the ante to $500,000, enough to pay off our mortgage, send the kids to college, and still have plenty left over. It was tempting, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about the money. This was about control, about power. Robert didn't just want my wife. He wanted to prove he could take whatever he wanted. When I confronted Lisa again, she broke down, admitting that she had already slept with Robert the night before. She had justified it to herself as a one-time thing, something that didn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. But as I looked at her, I realized the woman I had loved for so long was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. I spent the rest of the weekend in a fog, barely speaking to Lisa, avoiding Robert, and trying to figure out what to do next. On the last day, as we prepared to leave the island, I made my decision. This wasn't something I could forgive or forget. The damage was done, and there was no going back. When we got home, I filed for divorce. Lisa tried to talk me out of it, promising that things could go back to normal, but I knew better. Our marriage had been broken long before Robert entered the picture, and this was just the final nail in the coffin. The kids took it hard at first, but over time, they adjusted. I focused on rebuilding my life, and though it wasn't easy, I knew it was the right decision. As for Lisa, I heard through mutual friends that she stayed in touch with Robert for a while, but eventually, even he lost interest. In the end, she was left with nothing but the memories of a weekend that destroyed everything we had built together. And me? I found peace in knowing that I had walked away with my dignity intact, something that no amount of money could ever buy. The days that followed moved slowly, like the calm before a storm. David found himself in a fog, walking through the motions of life with Olivia, but every interaction was tinged with doubt and suspicion. Every time Olivia smiled at her phone or seemed lost in thought, David's mind spiraled back to that encounter with Marcus. Was it just his insecurity, or was there something more sinister happening? One evening, as David sat alone in his home office, pretending to work while his thoughts were consumed by his marital fears, his phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "Meet me tomorrow. We need to talk. Marcus." His heart pounded in his chest. Marcus? What could he possibly have to say now? David stared at the message for a while, torn between fear and curiosity. After a moment's hesitation, he decided to meet him. If Marcus had something important to reveal, David had to know. The next day, David found himself sitting at a small coffee shop outside the city. The place was nearly empty, and the cool fall breeze carried the scent of freshly brewed coffee through the air. David felt uneasy, tapping his fingers on the table as he waited. His mind raced with possibilities. What did Marcus want? Could this meeting finally confirm his worst fears? After what felt like an eternity, Marcus walked in. He was dressed casually, but there was a tension about him that David hadn't seen before. His confident, almost arrogant demeanor had been replaced by something more serious, more urgent. "David," Marcus greeted him with a curt nod as he sat down across from him. "What's this about, Marcus?" David asked, his voice steady, but the undercurrent of anger was undeniable. Marcus leaned back, his eyes scanning the cafe before locking onto David's. "I thought you should know the truth, even if it might break you." David's stomach churned. What truth? Marcus sighed and rubbed his hands over his face, as if trying to find the right words. "Olivia, your wife, she and I, we had a thing. It wasn't supposed to be serious, but it was. It is." David felt the world tilt. His vision blurred as Marcus's words crashed into him. Every worst fear he had ever entertained, every insecurity, was now being confirmed in the cruelest way possible. He couldn't breathe for a moment. "I'm not here to rub it in your face," Marcus added quickly, seeing David's reaction. "In fact, I'm here because Olivia called it off. She chose you. She told me to leave her alone, that you were the one she wanted, but you deserve to know the truth. She wasn't going to tell you." David's mind raced, trying to process the whirlwind of emotions. Anger, betrayal, sadness, they all fought for dominance. He wanted to scream, to hit Marcus, to walk out and never look back. But more than that, he wanted to know why. Why had this happened? Why had Olivia betrayed him? "Why tell me now?" David finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because I can't stand the lies anymore. She's making you live in a fantasy, and you don't deserve that. You deserve to know the truth. If I'm honest, I didn't think she'd choose you. But she did." David stared at Marcus, searching his face for any sign of deception, but all he saw was a man who was resigned, perhaps even remorseful. The gravity of it all was crushing him, making it difficult to even think straight. "I trusted you both," David said quietly, his voice filled with raw pain. "You were supposed to be my friend, Marcus. How could you do this to me?" Marcus lowered his gaze, unable to meet David's eyes. "I don't have an answer for that. I messed up. I made a choice, and it was the wrong one. I regret it, but it's done. I can't undo it. I just thought you should know what really happened." David stood abruptly, pushing his chair back with a screech. He couldn't sit there any longer, couldn't bear to hear another word. He had heard enough. Without another word, David walked out of the cafe, his body numb, his heart shattered. That night, David confronted Olivia. He had rehearsed what he would say 1,000 times in his mind, but the moment he saw her sitting in their living room, casually reading a book like nothing was wrong, his anger surged to the surface. Olivia, he said, his voice shaking. She looked up at him, smiling softly, but her smile faded when she saw the expression on his face. What's wrong? She asked, setting the book down. Don't play innocent, David snapped. I know. Olivia's eyes widened in surprise. What are you talking about? Marcus. He told me everything. For a brief moment, David saw fear flicker in Olivia's eyes, but she quickly masked it with a calm, practiced demeanor. I don't know what he told you, but it's not what you think, she said, standing up and walking toward him. Don't. David's voice was louder than he intended. Don't you dare lie to me. He told me about your affair, about how you chose me over him, as if I was some backup plan. Olivia's face paled, and she stopped in her tracks. The silence between them stretched, thick with tension. I was going to tell you, David. I didn't want to hurt you. David let out a bitter laugh. Too late for that, isn't it? Tears welled up in Olivia's eyes. It was a mistake, a horrible mistake, and I regret it every single day. But I chose you. Doesn't that count for something? David felt a fresh wave of anger at her words. No, no, it doesn't. You don't get to make me feel like some consolation prize. You betrayed me. You lied to me. And now you want me to just accept that. Olivia moved closer, her hands trembling as she reached for him. I love you, David. I never stopped loving you. Please, please give me a chance to fix this. David stepped back out of her reach. His mind was spinning. Every memory they had shared, every moment of their marriage, felt tainted now. He wanted to believe her, wanted to forgive her, but how could he ever trust her again? I need time, David finally said, his voice hollow. I need to think. Olivia's tears fell freely now, but she nodded, understanding that there was nothing she could say to make this right in that moment. David left the house, needing space, needing air. The betrayal cut too deep, and he didn't know if his heart could ever heal from this. For weeks, David distanced himself from Olivia. He threw himself into work, avoiding home as much as possible. But no matter how hard he tried, the pain of her betrayal clung to him, a constant weight he couldn't shake. Marcus had disappeared from their lives completely. After their conversation, David made it clear he wanted nothing more to do with him. It was over, but the damage had been done. Late one evening, while David sat alone in a hotel room, the same one he had been staying in for weeks, he received a call. It was from an unknown number, but he knew who it was before he even answered. David. Olivia's voice was soft, filled with emotion. I know I've hurt you more than I can ever make up for, but I need you to know that I love you. I made a mistake, the worst mistake of my life. But if you can find it in your heart to forgive me, I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worth that forgiveness. David closed his eyes, the weight of her words pressing down on him. Could he forgive her? Could he ever move past what she had done? Or was it too late for them? There was a long pause before he finally spoke. I don't know, Olivia. I just don't know. As he hung up, David realized that the path ahead of him was still uncertain. Whether he could forgive or not, whether their marriage could survive, only time would tell. But for now, all he knew was that he needed to find a way to heal, even if that meant doing it alone.